Near Middletown, Virginia, August 14th, 1864. Yesterday, the wagon trains arrived at Winchester, and our brigade took charge of them and escorted them to this point. We are not far from Cedar Creek, and the rebel army is on the south side of the creek. This valley is very beautiful. A perfect garden. August 15th and 16th, 1864. We remained quietly in our camp near Cedar Creek. Near Charlestown, Virginia, August 19th, 1864. Well, here we are again, back in the vicinity of Harper's Ferry. Wednesday night we left our camp near Cedar Creek and began to fall back. All night we marched, and the next day also until dark, when we reached Opequon Creek, where we crossed and then halted. After riding 24 hours, I was very weary and so sleepy that I could not sit in my saddle. As soon as we halted, I lay down in a clover field and went to sleep. Just as I was getting comfortable, an order came for us to take position on a bluff overlooking the river, as the enemy was supposed to be coming. Here we built a slight breastwork of rails and waited for the enemy, but he did not appear. At daylight, we resumed the march, and at dark yesterday we reached this place. Today we are getting a little sleep and rest. I shall try to get a leave of absence for 5 days to go to Philadelphia. August 20th, 1864. Hurrah! My leave of absence for 5 days has just been granted, and I am off for Philadelphia. August 21st, 1864. I rode over to General Custer's cavalry camp and requested an escort of cavalry to go with me to Harper's Ferry. He told me if I would wait until tomorrow morning, he would send one with me, but could not do so today. Being anxious to go on, I armed my orderly, and meeting a soldier mounted and going to Harper's Ferry, I pressed on. We narrowly escaped capture at the crossroads beyond Halltown, the guerrillas leaving a sutler's wagon that they were plundering as we approached. Arriving at Harper's Ferry, I took a freight train to the relay house, and a passenger train from there to Philadelphia, where I arrived on Monday morning, August 22nd, and went to the Continental Hotel. I passed 5 days in Camden, New Jersey, and then returned to camp. During my absence, the rebels attacked the line held by the 2nd Rhode Island, and one of our men was wounded. Harper's Ferry, Virginia, August 27th, 1864. I arrived back to my regiment at 3 o'clock in the afternoon today and found everything in good condition. Charlestown, Virginia, August 30th, 1864. Sunday, we left camp at Harper's Ferry and moved to this place again. Yesterday, the rebel cavalry attacked our lines, and we expected a battle, but the enemy withdrew. I am expecting a lot of recruits now in a few days. This will give me a larger command. Picket line, 1st Division, 6th Corps, near Charlestown, Virginia, September 2nd, 1864. Today I am on duty as division officer of the day and in charge of the picket line. I shall be relieved at dark today, as I went on duty last night. Last night I was in the saddle most of the time, riding along the line in the darkness. It was not very pleasant work, as our line runs through the woods, and there is much fallen timber. The country in this vicinity is very fine, and the farms are well cultivated. The people seem to be well disposed toward us, but it may be from policy or even force of habit. One gentleman kindly sent me some iced water by a servant as I passed his house. The nights are getting cold, and we find our overcoats to be very comfortable. Near Clifton, Virginia, September 3rd, 1864. Today we left our camp near Charlestown and moved up the valley to this point. About dark, the enemy attacked the line held by General Crook's command, the 8th Corps, but were repulsed. Our corps did not get into the fight. Only a few men were injured. An officer has just called and said, "Captain, you will have your command under arms at 4 o'clock in the morning tomorrow, as an attack by the enemy is expected." Well, let them attack. We shall be ready for them. September 4th, 1864. We were in line at 4 o'clock in the morning, but the enemy did not put in an appearance. September 5th, 1864. The 2nd Rhode Island had quite an adventure yesterday, which I will try to describe. After standing under arms until it was ascertained that the enemy were not in our immediate front, I was ordered to report to the brigade commander, Colonel Edwards. The colonel told me that I was to proceed with the 2nd Rhode Island and 5th Wisconsin Volunteers out on the road and establish an outpost about 1 mile from camp. The colonel supposed that I was the senior officer and would have command, but we found out that the captain commanding the 5th Wisconsin ranked me by date of commission, and he therefore took charge. A company from the 37th Massachusetts Volunteers, commanded by Captain Chamney, was attached to my regiment for the day. We marched out for a mile across the open plain until we reached a high hill with a thick hedge surrounding 3 sides of it. Here I suggested that we halt and entrench, leaving the main body of the troops, while a company or 2 be deployed as skirmishers and sent into the woods in our front. But the captain commanding the 5th Wisconsin, a German and a brave man, overruled me and insisted upon forming a line in the woods. We found the woods filled with large rocks, while the trees stood so thick as to render it impossible to see far in any direction. The 2nd Rhode Island formed line of battle, with the company from the 37th Massachusetts on the left flank, while the 5th Wisconsin went through the woods for perhaps a quarter of a mile and deployed as skirmishers. I had with me a mounted orderly from brigade headquarters, and he asked permission to look for some chickens. I gave him permission, but cautioned him to be on the watch for the enemy. About noon, as I was writing a letter, I heard some shots, and the orderly, bareheaded, leaped his horse over a rail fence and, landing near me, shouted, "The rebels are coming!" I immediately formed my men and ordered Captain Chamney to deploy his company of the 37th Massachusetts on my left flank, and then sent word to Captain Charles W. Kempf, commanding the 5th Wisconsin. The captain came back in great excitement and turned over the whole command to me. I requested him to remain in position while I sent the 2nd Rhode Island back to the hill mentioned above, where the men soon threw up a breastwork of rails. I went out onto the picket line and found that the attack came from a body of rebel cavalry. The firing was heard in camp, and General Russell, commanding our division, with Captain Henry H. Young, 2nd Rhode Island, on the brigade staff, came out. In the meantime, I had withdrawn the skirmishers and had posted them behind the hedge mentioned above. The general approved of my plans and ordered me to hold the position until dark and then retire to camp. After he retired, Captain Young rode out to the front and was fired upon by some rebels in a house. The captain rode off at great speed, followed by bullets and losing his hat. The rebel cavalry rode around to our rear and cut us off from camp, but not having any artillery, they could not drive us from the hill. If I had had a gun, I could have made it rain for them with shell. As soon as it became dark, I commenced sending the men into camp, a company at a time. Silently, a company would leave the hill, march for quite a distance up the line of woods, and then cross the plain, guided by the campfires. The mounted officers remained until the last company had left, and then we rode up along the edge of the woods until we had got beyond the rebels. Then we put spurs to our horses and soon reached our lines. It was reported in camp that we were prisoners. Our men were scattered along the entire line of the army, but are now coming into camp. Our losses, being well sheltered, were few, but we had what they call in this section of the country a right smart time. Clifton, Virginia, September 6, 1864. We have fortified our camps, building rifle pits in front of each brigade, but the enemy have retired and have marched up the valley in the direction of Winchester. The weather is cold, and we have had 2 days of hard rain. September 7th, 1864. Still in our works at Clifton, waiting. I am well and happy, and enjoy life as well as most people do. Plenty to do and plenty to eat. September 9th, 1864. I have heard from Lieutenant Smith. He is recovering from his wound and will rejoin the regiment as soon as the surgeons will allow. I have appointed him adjutant and shall be glad to see him. Near Clifton, September 11th, 1864. Today I am on duty as division officer of the day and have remained on the picket line. I shall be relieved at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I did not have my tent brought out, as it bid fair to be pleasant last night. About midnight I lay down under a tree, but a violent storm came up and I got wet. It thundered and lightened in fine style. 3 officers of a Pennsylvania regiment were crowded into a shelter tent, and they tried to make room for me. I crawled in, but it rained so hard that our tent leaked like a sieve, so we had to stand and take it. At daylight this morning, it cleared off, and we are feeling better-natured in the sunshine. September 12th, 1864. Last night, our brigade had a dress parade, commanded by Colonel Edwards. General Russell and other officers were present. The roads are now very muddy, and our movements may be delayed. The rebels are now on the line of Appomattox Creek, about 6 miles from our camp. September 15th, 1864. We have laid out our camps in fine style, and one would suppose from appearances that we were to remain here, but I do not believe it. We have regular drills now, and I drill my regiment for 1 hour and a half every afternoon. Dress parade ends the day's work. My mare Katie is a beauty, and I enjoy the rides, both on duty and for pleasure, which I take every day. Katie is a little wild, but I rather like to have her cut up antics. She is fast and a good jumper as well. It rains nearly every night, but the days are pleasant. Near Clifton, Virginia, Sunday, September 18th, 1864. This is a beautiful Sabbath day, and I have enjoyed it very much. Now that we are performing regular camp duty, we can make a distinction between Sunday and other days. But when we march, this is impossible. A foraging party has been out and returned with a large quantity of things, such as sheep, geese, turkeys, chickens, and so on. So just now we are in clover and living on the fat of the land. As it will not last, we make the most of it. I selected 1 lamb from our flock, and we are to make a pet of it. We have named him Dick, and he is already a great favorite. We may remain here for some time yet. Headquarters, 2nd Rhode Island Volunteers, Winchester, Virginia, Wednesday, September 21st, 1864. Thank God my life has been spared, and I have been permitted to share in one of the most decisive victories of the war. Sunday night, the 18th, we received orders to be in readiness to march at a moment's notice from our camp near Clifton. We knew that the order meant fight, and the men prepared themselves for the coming struggle by throwing away all that might impede their free movements. Ammunition was inspected, and the cartridge boxes were filled. Before daylight on the morning of Monday the 19th, our division left camp and took the road to Appomattox Creek. We marched slowly along, and it was 8 o'clock before we reached the creek. On the opposite bank, our cavalry were deployed across the plain, and white puffs of smoke here and there showed that the enemy were contesting the advance of the Union horsemen. We crossed the river, and our brigade was formed in column of regiments on a sandy plain. The 3rd Division of our corps was sent forward to attack the rebel lines, partly concealed in the woods and groves, but did not succeed in their efforts, and soon many stragglers were seen coming to the rear. Artillery was freely used on both sides, and after the repulse of our 3rd Division, it was generally thought that we would wait until dark and then retire to our fortified camps at Clifton. But we did not know Phil Sheridan. A rebel battery enfiladed our brigade, and a shot striking the horse of Captain Kempf, commanding the 5th Wisconsin Volunteers, then bounded down the line of his regiment and wounded several men. The horse, a large white animal, had a part of his flank shot off and started on a run, with his tail hanging by a piece of flesh. The captain jumped to his feet and shouted, "There goes my horse, my haversack, my blankets, my canteen." and he also named over all of his traps that went off on his horse. The blank spaces above may be supplied with adjectives. Notwithstanding the fact that shot and shell were plunging into our brigade, the group of officers, including myself, who witnessed this scene, rolled in the sand, convulsed with laughter. We had to change our position, for the rebels seemed to have the exact range of our line. About noon, our division was ordered in, and we drove the rebels back toward the city. The 2nd Rhode Island reached a little knoll near a house, and finding a heavy stone wall in my front, I formed behind it and opened fire. While in this position, the 37th Massachusetts, one of the best regiments I ever saw, and armed with Spencer 7 shooting rifles, had advanced well to the front and could be seen about a mile to my right, laying upon the ground exposed to the fire of the rebel guns in a redoubt. Colonel Edwards rode up to me and, pointing to the 37th Massachusetts, said, "For God's sake, Rhodes, take the 2nd Rhode Island and go and help Montague." The lieutenant colonel commanding the 37th Massachusetts is George L. Montague. I withdrew my regiment from the hill and, moving at a run along the rear of our line of battle, tried to gain the cover of a small piece of woods in rear of where the 37th was located. The rebels, seeing my movement, shelled us unmercifully, but we kept on and were soon in the woods. Behind this grove, I saw the ammunition train, and on one wagon, in large letters, 37th Mass. As they use a copper cartridge, a special wagon is provided for them. Suspecting that the 37th was out of ammunition, I hastily caused several boxes to be opened and then had our boys fill their pockets with cartridges. I then deployed the regiment as a skirmish line and instructed the officers and men to move to the front at a double quick, form on the right of the 37th, have their men lie down, and then close intervals to the left by creeping on the ground. The plan worked well, and we reached our position with the loss of only 2 or 3 men. I reported to Colonel Montague, who was the only man on his feet, and he said, "You can do no good, for I have no ammunition." I told my story, and the cartridges were distributed to his men. The rebel guns in the earthwork were about 400 yards off, and a white guidon showed above the parapets. I had my regiment rise, fire a volley, and then lie down and load again. We did this until the rebel guns were silenced. We remained here until the main line advanced to our position. General David A. Russell, commanding our division, was killed by a shell, and General Frank Wheaton assumed command. The country for, say, 3 miles each way about the city is open and covered with farmhouses and orchards. In rear of the city, as we faced, are a line of hills, and on the hills are forts. One of them, called the Star Fort, appeared to be the strongest. Our lines were formed with the 19th Corps on the right and the 6th Corps on the left, while the Cavalry Corps held the extreme right with the 8th Corps in reserve. About 5 o'clock in the afternoon, General Sheridan rode down the line, hat in hand, and the whole army cheered and shouted itself hoarse. An order for a general forward movement was given, and away we went. Colonel Edwards, our brigade commander, rode up to the 37th Massachusetts and seized the colors and shouted, "Forward!" Away we went, the 37th Massachusetts and the 2nd Rhode Island, heading for the battery that we so needed. The rebels limbered up their guns, but we pressed them so hard that they cut the traces and ran off with the horses, leaving 2 cannon in our hands. The rebel line broke and fled. Bugle calls were now heard on our right, and soon the cavalry was seen coming over the rolling ground. With loud shouts they dashed into the mass of fleeing rebels. Friend and foe mingled together, cutting and slashing right and left. The infantry stood still and looked on. The plain was covered with fleeing rebels, and soon 3 batteries on the hills ceased firing and, limbering up the guns, joined in the flight. All was confusion, and our batteries galloped to the front, unlimbered, and sent their shot and shell into the rebel mass. Down through the streets of Winchester fled the rebels, and our cavalry pursued. Firing up and down the streets took place. Darkness came on and put an end to the fight. Around one house, surrounded by a picket fence, I counted 16 dead cavalrymen, shot off their horses by rebels in the yard. The rebels left their dead and wounded on the field, as well as one piece of artillery and several caissons. After the fight, the men were wild with joy. I could have knelt and kissed the folds of the old flag that waved in triumph. We captured several rebel flags which were displayed along the front of our line. I cried and shouted in my excitement, and never felt so good before in my life. I have been in a good many battles, but never in such a victory as this. Hurrah for Sheridan! After the fight, our brigade commander rode up to the 2nd Rhode Island and called me out and said many complimentary things about us. He also informed me that he had recommended me for a brevet major's commission. All of this is very pleasant to me, for the regiment behaved very finely. The 2nd lost 9 men killed and wounded, and 7 missing. These may be killed, or they have been taken prisoners. We have captured a large number of rebel prisoners, and the city is full of wounded. We slept at night on the field. Continued in next message. The next morning, the 20th, we marched through the city with our corps, but on arriving on the south side of the town, our brigade turned into a field and formed in column of regiments. General Sheridan rode up and made a little speech. He praised the brigade for its good work of yesterday and said we were to be left in Winchester as a garrison. So here we are. Our first duty was to bring in such of the wounded as were not found last night. The Taylor House and the Virginia House, the 2 principal hotels, are used as hospitals and are full of wounded, while the churches as well as private houses are put to the same use. I rode out to the field to superintend the burial of the dead. I found the body of my friend, Major James Q. Rice of the 2nd Connecticut Heavy Artillery, and had it buried by itself, and shall try to send it home to his friends. He usually wore a fine Masonic pin, but someone had taken it from his coat. In fact, he had been robbed of everything of value. I cut a square and compass with his name, rank, and regiment upon an ammunition box cover and placed it at the head of the grave. Poor Rice! He was much older than I, but we were intimate, knowing each other as masons and comrades. Yesterday, one of my men, Private Henry Bromley of Company B, captured a rebel colonel and turned him into the courthouse yard with other prisoners. We have several hundred officers and a large number of enlisted men as prisoners. I visited the courthouse today and talked with some of the rebel officers. They were much depressed in spirits, for their defeat was a great surprise to them. While on the field, I met several ladies from Winchester, caring for the wounded of both sides, giving them water. It will take 2 or 3 days to finish the burial of the dead. It is a sad duty to perform. I never was in a battle where I felt so comfortable in my army experience. It did not seem possible for me to be killed or even injured, and for once, I rather enjoyed a fight. Perhaps it was because everything was in our favor. Winchester, Virginia, September 23rd, 1864. We have glorious news today. General Sheridan has again defeated the rebels at Fisher's Hill, 21 miles from here, and has taken 16 cannon and a large number of prisoners. We have sent off most of the prisoners, and the wounded are being taken care of. My regiment is camped on Kent Street, one of the main streets of the city. From a house nearby, I have borrowed some chairs, tables, etc., and have a very comfortable headquarters. Some of the people are very kind to us, but others have a rebellious spirit. No one, citizen or soldier, is allowed to leave the city, and martial law prevails. Some of the ladies, or so-called ladies, are inclined to be saucy and will leave the sidewalk if they meet a Yankee officer and take to the street. When they do this, we raise our hats and pass on. Yesterday, I was officer of the day, and had to ride through the city several times. Winchester is a pretty place. The main street is Loudon Street, while Kent, Market, and Braddock Streets run parallel with it. The cross streets are Cork, Water, Piccadilly, etc. September 27, 1864. The city is becoming more quiet, and we are getting used to our new duties. The army is now 100 miles away, near Harrisonburg. Last Sunday, September 25th, I was ordered to escort a wagon train to Strasburg, 21 miles up the valley. We had a fine march, passing Milltown, Kernstown, Bartonville, Newtown, and Middletown, arriving at our destination at dark. Here we remained overnight, and the next morning we started to return to Winchester. I found Strasburg full of rebel wounded, in charge of rebel surgeons on their parole. On our way back, September 26th, my orderly, Corporal Zacchaeus Chase, who is armed with a Spencer 7 shooting carbine, a present to me, took a ride into the woods looking for chickens. As he did not return, I became alarmed and was about to send out a company to look for him when I saw him riding across the field with 4 rebel soldiers in front of his horse. The corporal held his carbine in hand, and as their party came up, halted them and reported. 2 of these men had brass instruments, having belonged to a rebel band, but the others were soldiers. I made them retain the instruments and marched them into Winchester and delivered them to the provost marshal. The corporal rode upon them as they were sitting under a tree, and explaining that he had 7 cartridges in his carbine, demanded their surrender, so they came in quietly. At Newtown, a black man told me that Mosby and some of his men were in town and would attack us as we passed through. I caught a citizen and sent him to Colonel Mosby with my compliments and told him to get out of the town or I would burn it. The citizen asked me if I had orders to burn the town. I told him we would have the fire and get the order afterward. The rebels left and we could see them on the hills, but not near enough to fight. I did not propose to have them attack me from the houses. I sent some skirmishers into the town and then followed with the regiment. We posted pickets about the outskirts and then cooked our dinner in the street. We found plenty of milk, peaches, and grapes, which the people gladly sold to us. One lady invited me into her house and gave me a good lunch. 2 young ladies present turned their chairs and sat facing the wall, but this did not take my appetite away. I dined at a house near Kernstown and then returned to Winchester, arriving late in the afternoon. We made the entire march of 42 miles inside 48 hours, and I did not have a straggler. I passed last evening with some young ladies in the city, and today I am invited to dine with one of the residents. I hope we shall be allowed to spend the winter in Winchester, for it is great fun. One young girl told me that when the Union and rebel troops were fighting in front of her house, she ran out on the front steps in her excitement. She also said when she saw the Union flag, she cried for joy. All of our supplies now come from Martinsburg by wagon train. September 29th, 1864. Today I had a present from a citizen in the city of a beautiful bouquet. A company of recruits numbering 3 officers and 80 men arrived last night. This makes a fine addition to my command. The company will be known as Company E. Company D is on the road. The officers of Company E are Captain James A. Bowen, formerly a lieutenant in the 12th Rhode Island Volunteers, First Lieutenant Frank S. Halliday, promoted from sergeant in the 2nd Rhode Island, and Second Lieutenant John K. Dorrance, a recent graduate of Brown University. October 2nd, 1864. Today, Captain Bowen, Surgeon Smith, and I attended the Episcopal Church, it being the only one in use, the others having been taken for hospitals. This church has a fine organ and a choir. The music was good and we enjoyed it, but the sermon was a little rebellious. The rector was trying to prove that people should receive all afflictions as from the hand of God, and stated that no matter how diabolical the agents sent might be, the people should remember that the Lord sent them. How are you, diabolical Yanks? He prayed for all Christian rulers. I hope this included Jeff Davis, for he certainly is in need of prayer. There were several rebel officers present who belong in prison, but were paroled for the day in order that they might attend church. I wonder if the rebels would do as much for us if we were prisoners. The sacrament of the Lord's Supper was administered, and one Union soldier, a private, partook. Most of the ladies were dressed in black, and it seemed almost like a funeral. Several families lost friends in the late battle, and the whole city is in mourning. It made me sad to see the people so sorrowful and weeping, but when I remembered that they brought their troubles upon themselves, and that the women encouraged the men to make war on the government, I could not help feeling that their punishment was just. When the contribution box was passed, the rebels put in Confederate money, but the Union soldiers deposited United States money. I saw one citizen take out a roll of Confederate bills, take one off without looking at it, and put it in the box. He had better put in a New York Herald, for that would have sold for a price here. As we were walking back to camp, two young misses in front of us were talking about the service. One said, "Did you see our boys there? I suppose they let them out of prison to attend church." "Oh, you little rebels," said Sergeant Smith as we passed on. "Yesterday it rained all day, and it was quite cold, but today it is warm and pleasant again. A few nights since, while spending an evening with a family in the city, a Miss Virginia Wall told me that she knew a Rhode Island man in the rebel army, that his name was James R. Sheldon, and that he was a sergeant in Kershaw's division and belonged to a Georgia regiment. This is my old schoolmate and neighbor of Pawtuxet. I have written to his family, as this news is only about 2 weeks old. October 4th, 1864. I have taken a walk through the cemetery near the city, and my heart was sad as I passed the new-made graves of Confederate soldiers and saw the wreaths of flowers which mourning hands placed there. I have seen more sad scenes of the war since coming to Winchester than ever before. I met a lady a few days since who has had 3 brothers killed and one maimed for life since the war began. She is still very bitter and desires to have the war go on. As we walked around some trees, we came upon a party of ladies and paroled rebel officers burying the body of a rebel colonel. It was too late for us to retreat, and so we removed our hats and stood near the party. A rebel officer in uniform read the burial service. The scene was a sad one, and the people looked at us as if we were intruding, but I did not feel it would be right to leave, and so remained. The dead man was Colonel Funk of Winchester. Wednesday, October 5th, 1864, today I took the 2nd Rhode Island Volunteers and the 5th Wisconsin Volunteers and went into the country to search the houses for arms. The people are honest farmers during the day, but at night they arm themselves, and mounting their horses are guerrillas, and fire upon our pickets and destroy our wagon trains if they can overpower the guards. The work was not pleasant, but we had to perform our duty. The people were often wild with rage, but we found that those who professed their innocence the loudest had the most contraband arms. At one house, after putting the family under guard in a room, we found in various places all the equipment of a soldier except the gun. This, after much searching, we found in the grain room, hidden in a barrel which was filled with grain. We loaded a 6-mule wagon with arms, equipment, and saddles, and returned to camp. A gentleman from Massachusetts went with me looking for the grave of his son, killed on the 19th. He found it in the woods and was almost heartbroken as he knelt beside it. Yesterday, myself and officers dined with a family in the city. October 7th, 1864. 2 more of my men have died from the effects of wounds and will be buried today. I am field officer of the day and shall be busy riding about the picket line all day. Sunday, October 9th, 1864. I have attended church today at the Episcopal Church. The sermon was a rebellious one, as usual, and I fear did me little good. After the service, the rector gave the following notice. A chaplain of a New York regiment will hold service in this church this evening at early candlelight, but as we have no way of lighting up, perhaps he will not want this notice given. The rebels smiled as if it was a good joke, but after the service we decided that the church would be lighted if each of us had to hold a candle in our hand. But the people are not all rebels by any means. Last night a boy came to my tent with a beautiful bouquet and said, "Captain, here are some flowers which Sister sent to you. It is rumored that General Sheridan is to retire down the valley, and we may have to leave. But I hope not, for I like this place very much. It is quite cold now, and our overcoats are in demand." That concludes the 12th part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe for more episodes and leave a comment.